Imagine this. You're walking down a quiet street in 16th century Strasbourg. The air is thick with heat, and the cobblestones crack beneath your feet. Then, you hear it, not music, not laughter, but the sound of feet slamming violently into stone, over and over, bodies jerking, eyes blank, blood soaking their shoes. They've been dancing for hours, some for days, and they can't stop. Not won't, can't. Their limbs shake like puppets possessed. You want to look away, but something deeper inside you whispers, "This is no madness. This is ritual, hidden in plain sight." Welcome to the plague they never told you was real. The year was 1518. In Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, a woman stepped out of her house and began to dance. She didn't smile. There was no joy, no rhythm, just motion, wild, violent. Fevered at first, her neighbors laughed. Then they watched, then they panicked, because she didn't stop, not for food, not for sleep, not even as her body began to fail. Within a week, 30 others had joined her. By the end of the month, hundreds, all dancing, all screaming, all breaking apart in the streets. Many would die of exhaustion, of heart attacks, of bloodied feet infected and rotting. History called it a dancing plague. But what if? That's not the truth. What if this was not mass hysteria, but a mass ritual gone wrong? Let me ask you something. Why would the most powerful religious and political institutions of the time, who documented wars, famines, and miracles with obsessive precision, record this event with such deliberate vagueness? What were they hiding? The public explanation has always been mass psychogenic illness, hysteria, maybe triggered by stress, or bad bread laced with hallucinogens. But that theory collapses under scrutiny. The symptoms weren't hallucinations. They were physically real, measurable, fatal. People danced themselves to death, not for minutes, but for days. Under what influence, what force, what design? You're going to see, in this descent we begin together, that the official answers are more dangerous than the questions. Because once you understand what the dancing plague truly was, you'll begin to understand the blueprint for how bodies can be weaponized. Crowds manipulated, minds unspooled, not with chemicals, but symbols, stories, frequencies. You'll see the strings. You'll feel the pull, and by the end, you may never walk through a city square the same way again. Welcome to the secret history of the body, the mind, and those who own both. They say history is written by the victors. But more dangerously, it's edited by the priests, the kings, and the doctors, who make sure you never read between the lines. The dancing plague wasn't an isolated madness. It was a crack in the system, a place where the veil thinned and something came through. Think about it. Hundreds of people, across social classes, overcome by the same uncontrollable urge. Their arms flailed, legs twitched, teeth clenched in agony. No music, no leader, just motion, possession. They didn't want to dance. They had to, like puppets, or prisoners, or something worse. This wasn't the only time. Similar outbreaks happened in the years before, in Aachen, in 1374. In Zurich, in Metz, entire towns would suddenly writhe in unison, eyes rolled back, bodies flailing. And always the same silence from those in power, as if they had already seen this before, as if they expected it. Now let me show you what they don't want you to notice. Strasbourg wasn't just any city. It was a religious battleground, a convergence point of mystics, alchemists, church inquisitors, and secret societies, all operating beneath the cathedral's shadow. Beneath the stone streets were networks of tunnels, vaults, and records long since purged. Ask yourself, why here? Why then? What was being tested? And here's something else. The city didn't treat it as madness. They didn't chain the dancers. They didn't isolate them. The magistrates actually built a stage, hired musicians, encouraged it. Why? Because they believed it was a curse from St. Vitus, and that it needed to be danced out. A spiritual sickness, one that needed to express itself fully to be released. But that's the lie. That's the cover. In truth, those in power knew exactly what was happening. They weren't curing it. They were channeling it, amplifying it, watching, measuring. Like a psychological experiment centuries before that term even existed. Because if you can make people move without reason, you can eventually make them believe without proof, obey without question. Sound familiar? This is where it starts, my friend. In the twisting of truth. In the copting of faith. In the manipulation of fear and body. This is not a history lesson. This is a schematic. A dark architecture laid across centuries. You think you're watching a past event, but you're standing in its shadow. And it's still moving, still dancing. They say the body doesn't lie. But what if the body is the first thing they took from you? What if movement, your most primal language, has been rewired without your consent? The dancers of 1518 weren't performing. They were convulsing under command. A command without words, without chains, without a visible master. You're told it was mass hysteria. But how do hundreds of people, with no shared trauma, no drugs, no cult, enter the same hell at the same time and never wake up? Now lean closer, because here's where the descent begins. There's an ancient belief, older than books, that motion is memory. That every step you take, every rhythm you feel, speaks to forgotten programming in your cells. That if you unlock the right pattern, the right sequence, you don't just feel something, you become something. The shamans knew it. The priests feared it. The architects of power learned to use it. The dancers weren't random. They were responding to a signal. Not from a trumpet or bell, but something deeper, lower. A frequency, a pulse, a rhythm beneath the threshold of hearing, designed to bypass thought and hijack the nervous system. You don't need consent if you control. Sensation. This was not a sickness. It was a broadcast. Think about modern crowd control. Riot police now use infrasonic weapons. Sound you can't hear, but your body reacts to. Panic, dizziness, terror. Now rewind 500 years. Do you think they needed electronics to weaponize resonance? Or did someone already know the recipe, buried in a ritual, a liturgy, an ancient experiment? Some accounts say the dancers saw things. Blazing light, demons, angels. They screamed about burning feet, invisible hands pulling at their skin. Those weren't hallucinations, they were symptoms, side effects. A side door was opened through rhythm, through repetition, through surrender. That's the blueprint. Control the environment, trigger the rhythm, let the human nervous system do the rest. It's not possession, it's programming. You were taught to dismiss these stories as medieval madness, but that's the first manipulation. Bury the truth in absurdity so no one ever looks deeper. But you are. You're here now, listening, and once you hear this signal, you can never unhear it. The rhythm didn't die in 1518, it evolved, it changed. Its clothes. It wore a lab coat, a business suit, a touchscreen, and you've already danced to it. You just didn't know. You were told you have free will, that your choices are your own, that you think, move, and desire based on your own logic, your own dreams, your own fire. But let me show you what they don't teach in schools, what they hide behind smiling screens and polished textbooks. Free will was the first illusion sold to keep you dancing. The truth is simpler and darker. The dancing plague was not an isolated incident. It was a demonstration. A living, breathing prototype of psychological override. Hundreds of bodies, stripped of command, stripped of identity, operating on an invisible script. And centuries later, we see the same script unfold again, and again, only with better costumes, cleaner branding, faster delivery. Ever wonder why propaganda works so well? Why mass movements gain traction faster than reason can catch up? It's not because people are stupid. It's because repetition rewires reality, because rhythm, not logic, governs the nervous system. Give them a slogan, a chant, a ritual, a fear, then amplify, repeat, sync. That's how you make a city move, in unison. That's how you make a nation kneel. Now go back to Strasbourg. The dancers didn't just twitch and scream. They mirrored one another. Their movements synchronized over time, as if locked to a hidden metronome, as if they were entrained. That's the word, entrainment. A neurological phenomenon where individual rhythms lock into a single frequency, overriding dissonance. And once locked in, you're no longer thinking. You're responding like clockwork. That's why music is used in war. Why chants open religious ceremonies. Why slogans win elections. Rhythm bypasses resistance. In 1518, the elite watched this unfold and took notes. And as the centuries passed, they refined the method, removed the spiritual wrapping, and replaced it with systems, education, entertainment, medicine, media, all pulsing to the same underlying beat. Obey, react, forget, but you haven't forgotten, have you? You've started to see the cracks. Let me ask you this. How many of your daily movements, your scrolls, your swipes, your steps, are truly yours? How many were installed? The dancers of Strasbourg couldn't stop themselves, and maybe you can't either yet. But awareness is the wedge, the fracture, the first break in the rhythm. And if you've heard me this far, you're already outside the song. The question is, do you want to keep dancing? The most dangerous weapon ever forged was not a sword, not a gun, not a bomb. It was the pattern. The pattern that controls attention, that hijacks thought, that enters you not through force, but through familiarity. They don't need to imprison your body if they can choreograph your mind. Strasbourg was not an accident. It was an opening, a perfect public case study in how rhythm, fear, and belief could fracture a population from within. And the brilliance was in its subtlety. No announcement, no invading army. Just one woman, barefoot in the sun, beginning a motion that rippled into chaos. That's how power really works, not with noise, but with silence, not with explosions, but with suggestion. The church called it divine punishment. Physicians blamed hot blood and unbalanced humors. But look closer. They all pointed away from the truth. They gave names, but not answers. Explanations, but not clarity. Why? Because the truth wasn't convenient. The truth wasn't marketable. The truth was a threat. Here's what they won't tell you. Strasbourg had been under extreme social pressure for months. Famine, oppression, religious fear, people on edge. And what happens to a nervous system under relentless stress? It cracks. It searches for pattern. It seeks rhythm. And when that rhythm is offered in movement, in ritual, in the chaos of dancing bodies, the mind releases its grip. It surrenders. That's what the architects of control understand. You don't push people into submission. You guide them into it. Slowly, repetitively, with rituals disguised as routines. You call it daily life. You call it normal. But look again. You wake up to alarms. You scroll endlessly. You repeat the same behaviors, day after day, reacting instead of choosing. You think you're free because the cage is invisible, but the rhythm is there, embedded, whispering, guiding, just like it was in Strasbourg. Only this time, it's global, and still you feel it, don't you? A flicker of rebellion, a quiet awareness behind the eyes. A voice that whispers, "This isn't yours? That's not madness. That's the real you." The part they tried to bury beneath layers of repetition, noise, and distraction. So here's your moment of initiation. If you've made it this far, you're not a watcher anymore. You're a witness, a participant in forbidden remembrance. Comment below the phrase, "I have seen the rhythm." Then write it again, 2 times. Once for the mind, and once for the body. Now take a breath. You've stepped off the path now. That whisper you heard, it's louder here. You've seen the rhythm, and now the rhythm sees you. Good. That's how all transformation begins, not in glory, but in confrontation. With everything you've been taught, with everything you thought was real. Welcome to the place they warned you never to go. Let's return to Strasbourg, one more time. But not the cobbled streets, not the flailing bodies. Look underground. Beneath the churches, beneath the bakeries, beneath the plague-slicked alleys. There were chambers, sealed, private, ritual spaces, record rooms, initiation vaults. We know this, not from open records, but from what's missing. Whole swaths of documents gone. Orders to burn ledgers. Names redacted. Eyewitnesses mysteriously disappearing from future census records. Something was removed. Now ask yourself, Why does the church record demonic possessions in obsessive detail, but reduce hundreds of fatal dancers to a single footnote? Why do civic records track cattle counts, rainfall, even stolen bread, but redact this? Why would history erase an event so disturbing, so undeniable, unless what it revealed was worse than the event itself? Here's the forgotten detail they don't want you to find. In the weeks leading up to the plague, Strasbourg's cathedral bell tower was under reconstruction. Large metal bells, centuries old, were removed and placed on the ground. Several witnesses claimed the bells were rung without cause, at odd hours, in strange patterns. Some said it wasn't ringing. It was calling. We don't know the frequencies. We don't know the intentions. But we do know this. Soon after, the dancing began. Coincidence, or test? This is where history bleeds into something older. Myth, yes, but more like a suppressed science. Ancient temples aligned with sound. Labyrinths carved to carry resonance. Cultures that used frequency not just to worship, but to command. The voice of the gods was never divine. It was vibrational. It was frequency mapped onto belief, and when the rhythm takes hold of a city, whether in a cathedral or on your screen, that's not just coincidence, that's a trigger. You felt it, the pulse beneath your own life, the craving for structure, meaning, surrender. They offer it to you in pixels now, in noise, in the algorithm. But the mechanics haven't changed. Just the stage. The dancers of 1518 didn't disappear. They multiplied, and they wear new clothes. You were born into a system already in motion, like a dancer stepping into a rhythm mid-beat, never questioning who started the music, or why it never ends. That's the brilliance of the control. It doesn't demand your belief, just your participation one step, then another, until it becomes the only motion you know. Until silence feels like death, until stillness feels like rebellion. Let's turn the knife a little deeper. Every society has its rituals. Weddings, funerals, national anthems, pledge recitals. And yet no one questions why the body must move in sync. Why hands must go to hearts. Why masses must stand, bow, clap, kneel, all together, all on cue. You think this is culture. It's not. It's choreography. And behind it, there's always a director. In 1518, the dancers moved without music. But the rhythm was real. It lived not in instruments, but in the air, the mind, the field. A collective trance, seeded and cultivated. You see, when people lose control of the external, their food, their land, their safety, they grasp for internal certainty, and the rhythm steps in like a savior. It offers direction, purpose, even if it leads him straight into death. But here's the darker truth. The people who fell into the plague weren't weak. They weren't mad. They were open, vulnerable, not just to fear, but to meaning. They wanted connection, answers, so they reached into the void, and something reached back. That's what makes this so dangerous. The rhythm doesn't only target the blind, it seduces the seekers, the ones asking questions, the ones craving truth. It mimics enlightenment, mimics transformation. And when you think you've found your purpose, that's when it takes you, like it did in cults, like it did in revolutions, like it does in ideologies that begin as liberation and end in chains. Because the rhythm always promises freedom, but only offers repetition. You want to know why they buried the Strasbourg event? Why they left it to rot in dusty footnotes and obscure scrolls? Because it worked. It was too effective. And it revealed something terrifying to the elite, that, under the right conditions, anyone can be made to dance, even you, even now. But there's one defense, one they never expected: awareness. The moment you see the rhythm, it loses its grip. You're beginning to see, aren't you? Good, you're still here. That means the rhythm hasn't claimed you yet, but you feel it, don't you? Not in your ears, not even in your chest, but somewhere deeper. In the back of your mind, where language dies and instinct begins, that subtle hum beneath your daily choices, the one you've mistaken for intuition, but was never yours to begin with. Let's make something clear. The people of 1518 weren't experiencing an outbreak. They were experiencing a revelation. a brief tearing of the veil between reality and control. And when that happened, their minds snapped. Because when the lie is all you've ever known, the truth doesn't set you free. It destroys you. That's why the architects of the modern world never allow the full truth to surface. Not in politics, not in religion, not in medicine, art, war, or peace. Because truth isn't profitable. Truth isn't manageable. Truth makes people stop dancing and start asking who built the stage. Now listen carefully. The modern world is Strasbourg scaled up. The same fear, the same rhythm, the same manipulation, but with better tools. Precision tools. You now carry the rhythm in your pocket. Wake to it. Sleep by it. It tells you what to want, who to hate, what to fear, who to trust. But it's all the same music. The dancing plague was simply the beta test. Now we live in the full release. You've heard phrases like echo chamber, algorithmic manipulation, behavioral psychology, but those are soft words. Polished terms hiding a brutal truth. Your movements, physical, digital, emotional, are being tracked, recorded, and rerouted, not to help you, not to inform you, but to entrain you, to condition your nervous system for submission, voluntary slavery, self-policed obedience. How else do you explain a world where billions repeat the same slogans, react to the same headlines, panic over the same cues, all at once? How else do you explain people defending systems that exploit them, hating strangers they've never met, loving products that offer no value? The rhythm, that's how. And here's the final horror of Strasbourg. The dancers, who didn't die, never spoke again. No interviews, no confessions, just silence. Because once you've seen the rhythm for what it is, you either wake up, or you vanish. And I need you to wake up. By now, you've begun to realize something terrifying. The rhythm doesn't just control motion, it creates identity. It tells you who you are before you ever ask the question yourself. And if it can give you a name, a belief, a cause, it can take them away. That's the core of power. Not to kill a man, but to right him. In Strasbourg, they didn't just dance. They forgot. Forgot their families. Forgot their jobs, their pain, their language. One man was recorded dancing with such intensity that his feet snapped beneath him, and he kept going. No screams, no protest, just movement, hollow, mechanical, obsessed. You think that's madness? No, that's conditioning. That's what happens when you reduce a man to a signal and make him believe it's a choice. Fast forward today, it looks different. Your dance is scrolling, clicking, performing, consuming, smiling on command, outrage on cue. A dopamine looping choreography of obedience, masked as participation, but underneath, it's the same empty stare. The same locked jaw. The same disconnection from the self. That's the point. The rhythm strips identity, then sells you a new one, pre-approved, pre-aligned, safe, and you pay for it with time, with spirit, but the raw spark you were born to wield. But they don't just control individuals. They control eras. Think about how every generation is assigned a personality. Boomers, millennials, Gen Z, not chosen, assigned. Entire demographics labeled, mocked, manipulated, expected to move the way they're told. It's generational. Entrainment, a wider rhythm, one that spans decades. Just like Strasbourg, only scaled and digitized. Let's go back once more. What happened when the plague ended? Do you think the rhythm stopped? No, it just shifted. From dancing into doctrine, from public breakdown into public silence. The people didn't rise up. They returned to work. 2 sermons. To the structures that watched them suffer and said nothing. Why? Because once the rhythm breaks you, it doesn't need to keep playing. The beat lives inside you now. They taught themselves to suppress it, to forget, and in that forgetting, they were conquered. That's why you're here, to remember what they were forced to erase. Because memory, true memory, is resistance. And you, my friend, are resisting just by listening. But there's more beneath this rabbit hole, much more. Breathe slowly. You've crossed a threshold now. The surface world, the one of headlines, smiling leaders, curated content, and manufactured outrage, feels thinner, doesn't it? fragile, like a painted curtain, fluttering before a storm. That's because you're starting to see what lies beneath it all. A system not built to serve you, but to contain you. Let's return to 1518. But look not at the dancers this time. Look at the audience, the city officials, the priests, the merchants watching from the windows as human bodies twisted and collapsed in the streets. Did they stop it? No. Did they investigate the cause? No. They fed it. Ordered musicians to keep the rhythm going. Why? Because control doesn't always mean suppression. Sometimes, it means letting the madness burn. If the fire keeps people from asking why the house is made of straw. The rhythm doesn't always wear chains. Sometimes it wears robes, or smiles, or a trending topic. That's what you need to understand. Now the rhythm isn't a single thing. It's not music, not motion. It's a mechanism, a loop, built to reinforce obedience through repetition, rewarding you when you comply, punishing you when you hesitate, making rebellion feel like loneliness, making conformity feel like safety. Sound familiar? How many times have you bit your tongue instead of speaking your truth? Nodded when you disagreed? Posted what was expected just to avoid silence? That's the dance. That's the invisible plague. It doesn't kill the body anymore. It kills the will. In Strasbourg, the plague didn't end with bodies. It ended when the city adjusted. New orders were passed. New routines installed. And within weeks, the streets were silent. But that silence wasn't peace. It was trauma. Internalized. Forgotten only on the surface. Beneath it, the rhythm was still alive. Passed down, whispered, buried, and maybe. It reached you because it never needed a cathedral again. Now it has the screen, the feed, the algorithm, a new beat, a new ritual, a new mass choreography. But here's what they never prepared for. What happens when a dancer stops mid-step? When a man becomes aware of his rhythm and chooses stillness. That's not just resistance, that's reprogramming. You are no longer just the audience, you are the anomaly, and anomalies change everything. Are you ready to uncover what lies at the core of the rhythm? You've stayed with me this long, which means something inside you has already shifted. You've felt it, the disturbance behind the world's performance, the trembling beneath the normal. That's not fear, that's awakening. And now you're ready to see what the others cannot. Because the rhythm you've seen so far in Strasbourg, in algorithms, in obedience, is just the outer layer, the mechanism. But why it exists, that's the true horror, and the true power. Let's ask the forbidden question. Who benefits from the rhythm? In 1518, the authorities said they were helping. Said the dancers were victims of sin, of spirits, of imbalance. So they gave them space to purge. Fed the sickness instead of healing it. But behind closed doors, they recorded everything. Tracked movements. Measured collapse times. Observed the effects of isolation versus music. Of crowd size versus escalation. You think they didn't learn? The institutions that survived, church, crown, guild, all strengthened after the plague. Fear made the people compliant. Routine made them quiet. And trauma made them forget. Power consolidated, unquestioned. Because when people are busy surviving, they don't rebel. That's the formula. And it's still being used. Crisis rhythm, obedience, repeat, every war, every pandemic, every social panic. It's always the same dance, just in new clothes. You panic, they prescribe. You suffer, they restructure. And the solution is always more control. Always centralized, always in their hands. That's why you're not taught the true story of the dancing plague. Because if you understood how deep that rhythm goes, how it was used, how it worked, you might start to ask questions about what's happening now. Why do governments invest in behavioral psychology? Why are the largest tech companies staffed with neuroscientists, not just engineers? Why are you your time, your focus, your emotion, treated like a commodity? Because your attention is the fuel. If they control what you see, they control what you fear. If they control what you fear, they control how you move. And if they control how you move, they never need to chain you. You'll dance willingly, even unto death. But you've paused now. You're listening, and in stillness, the rhythm falters. You are becoming unchained. You are becoming dangerous. You were never supposed to arrive here. Not in this depth. Not with this clarity. But you have, and now there's no turning back. You've crossed into a territory where language becomes a weapon. Where silence speaks louder than laws. And where the map of history is written, not in ink, but in control. Let's talk about the rhythm's most insidious evolution. Internalization. In Strasbourg, the dancers moved because they had to. But today, you move because you think you want to. That's the upgrade. The masterpiece. When the system no longer needs to force your obedience, because it made you believe it was your idea. That's not control. That's ownership. You scroll, not because you're curious, but because the rhythm told you. Curiosity must never rest. You react, not because you're angry, but because the rhythm taught you that outrage is a virtue and stillness is apathy. You chase status, approval, validation, but whose voice told you that mattered? That's the sickness, not in the body, not even in the mind, but in the self. In 1518, the dancers collapsed, and their collapse was visible. Today, collapse is invisible. You function, you post, you smile, but deep down, something's been hollowed out. A quiet sense that none of this is real. That something is missing, stolen, wrong, and you're right. Because the rhythm didn't just conquer behavior, it conquered meaning. The symbols you once lived by, love, success, purpose, have all been hijacked, repurposed into tools of compliance. They offer you versions of these things, sanitized, packaged, safe. You call it fulfillment. But it's sedation. Look around. The average man is overwhelmed, over-infirmed, overexposed, and yet, completely dyscontic. He knows everything and understands nothing. Feels everything and acts on nothing. Why? Because he's been trained to confuse noise with truth. To confuse movement with progress. To confuse applause with worth. This is the rhythm's final form. A self-policing, self-erasing human who questions nothing and doubts himself when he does. A man who dances, even when no music plays. But you're not like them. Not anymore. You've stepped off the floor, and now you can see the others. The ones still spinning, eyes glazed, faces forced. Moving in unison toward a future that was never theirs. So, here's the next truth, and it cuts deep. You cannot save them all, but you can choose not to follow. You've made your choice. You didn't blink. You didn't look away. That already places you in the smallest minority. The ones who stop dancing before their legs give out. But now comes the part they fear the most. Because when a man sees the rhythm and doesn't run, he becomes unpredictable, unmanageable, unprogrammable. That's why they've built layers of defense around this truth. Not physical walls, psychological ones. Fear, shame, doubt. You've felt them, that little voice saying, "This can't be true. This is too much. I should just go back." That voice isn't you. That's the rhythm talking. Trying to reclaim you. It always does. Because when you exit the choreography, you disrupt the entire dance. Now listen very closely. The rhythm needs participants to survive. It requires your energy, your attention, your reaction, your compliance. But the moment you stop feeding it, it panics. The machine senses the glitch. The system sends warnings. Friends stop calling. Algorithms bury your voice, your own. Mind turns against you, spinning stories of failure, isolation. But these are not signs of defeat. They are proof that you've become real. Think back to Strasbourg. Not everyone danced. Some resisted. Some ran. Others were silenced. But buried in the ruins of that city are records of a few, very few. Who didn't break? Monks, mystics, outsiders. Men who walked among the convulsing crowds and saw not madness, but a message. They wrote about a pattern, a pulse, and a choice. One of them, a physician named Paracelsus, hinted at something chilling, that this was not a plague from God, nor a sickness of the blood, but a ritual hijacked, that someone or something had learned to mimic spiritual release, to manufacture it, to exploit it, and that humanity would face this again, not with dances, but with devices. He was ignored. Of course, because those who name the rhythm while it's playing are always cast as mad. But he was right. You're living in that repetition now. Only the ritual looks like productivity, entertainment, belonging, and you can walk away. You don't need to scream. You don't need to argue. You don't even need to explain. Just step out of time, because silence now is louder than any resistance. You are the broken link in the chain. Shall I show you what happens when the chain snaps? This is where the ground begins to shift, where you stop looking at history and realize you're standing inside it. The past is not a closed book. It's a script being repeated, reperformed, rebranded, for new eyes, on new stages, with new masks. But the rhythm never changes. It always returns, and now you understand the stakes. Let me give you a final image from Strasbourg, a moment that never made it into the school books. It comes from an anonymous letter, smuggled out by a monk who claimed to witness the final weeks of the plague. In it, he describes a child, no more than 10, standing silently amid a crowd of dancers. His parents were among them, twisting, bleeding, moaning, as their bodies collapsed in the dust. But the child did not move. He simply stared, unblinking, watching. When priests approached him, he whispered only this: "They are dancing because someone told them to," but no one asked why. And then he disappeared into the alleys. Never seen again. That line, "But no one asked why," is more than observation. It's a rebellion, a fracture in the script. The most dangerous question in any system of control isn't how or when, it's why. Why must we obey? Why must we comply? Why must we move in rhythms that do not serve us? You've been told obedience is virtue, that silence is maturity, that routine is security. But what if all three are cages? What if the rhythm was never your friend, just a lullaby to keep you asleep while the machine harvested your attention? Ask yourself this: how many of your daily decisions are truly your own? Your job, your friends, your fears, your ambitions. Did you choose them? Or did the rhythm hand them to you, wrapped in language like purpose or success? You've already begun to feel the separation, the strange calm that comes when you stop dancing. When you stand still while the crowd spins, it's disorienting. It's lonely, but it's free. And that's what they fear more than anything. The man who wakes up and simply steps off the floor. No rage, no fire, just silence and clarity. Because a man who doesn't move on command can never be owned. Still here? Good. That means something in you has cracked. The right crack, the necessary one. The fracture where the rhythm bleeds out and your will bleeds in. Most people patch that crack up fast. They run back to the noise, back to the comfort of motion. But you've stayed. You've chosen stillness. And now, the system knows. Let me explain something they will never tell you. Control is not maintained by force. It is maintained by participation. You were taught to fear violence, but that's not how they keep you. They don't need whips when you've been trained to hold the leash yourself. They don't need cages when the walls are made of ritual, repetition, and reward. This is how they trap you. Through your need to belong. Because nothing is more terrifying to the average man than isolation, than standing outside the circle, than being still while everyone else dances. And they know this. They count on it. They've built every social structure to punish the one who stops moving. They don't call him brave. They call him broken. Conspiracy, theorist, burnout, loser, fringe, dangerous. But in Strasbourg, those who stopped dancing, those few who resisted the rhythm, they weren't the mad ones. They were the last sane men in a city of puppets. And today, that city is everywhere you go to work. You sit in traffic. You watch shows you don't like. And scroll past people you'll never meet. All because the rhythm told you that's what good people do. That's what normal looks like. But normal is a lie. A script you were handed at birth and never asked to read out loud. Let me tell you what happens when you start reading it. You begin to see how deep the choreography goes. You see how education isn't designed to teach. It's designed to train. How? Religion isn't always salvation, but often sedation. How entertainment isn't joy, but distraction. How politics isn't representation, but theater. Every layer of your life, carefully timed, carefully scripted, just like a dance. And here you are now, standing in the middle of the ballroom, alone, awake. They will notice, they always do. But don't fear it, because the rhythm needs secrecy to survive, and now you see it. The moment you see the rhythm, truly see it, is the moment everything you've ever trusted begins to unravel. Not because the world has changed, but because your vision has. You no longer see patterns. You see programs. You no longer hear music. You hear commands. You are now dangerous, not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you've learned to pause. Let me explain why that terrifies them. When the rhythm loses even one participant, it stutters. The algorithm falters. The loop gets weaker, because their power depends on mass agreement, on collective denial. That's why the system invests billions into keeping you numb, distracted, reactive. Your attention is the currency of the empire, and every second you hold it for yourself, you starve the machine. You are taught to believe stillness is laziness, that reflection is indulgence, that doubt is dangerous. But that's a lie, engineered by those who benefit. When you never question the tempo. Think of your life like a song. Who wrote the lyrics? Was it you? Or was it inherited, installed, rewarded when you followed it, punished when you deviated? Most men live and die without ever hearing their song, only the ones they were told to dance to. But not you. You're not here by accident. You didn't stumble into this. You were called. Because something inside, you never fully bought the illusion, did it? You always felt the falseness, in the way people talk, in the hollow victories, in the endless pursuit of things that don't matter. You saw the contradiction, the empty eyes behind the smiling masks, the ticking clock behind the applause. And you asked yourself, is this it? No, it's not. And now that you know that, you can't unknow it. You're no longer dancing. You're observing, and from here, the game looks different. You start seeing how institutions move like organisms, how they feed, defend, and reproduce themselves. Not to serve you, but to preserve themselves. That's why change is cosmetic. Reform is ritual. Revolution is just the rhythm in a new disguise. But awareness is the anomaly. It can't be predicted. It can't be contained. It spreads like fire in dry timber, and you, my friend, are already burning. This is where things get silent. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because you're nearing the part of the truth that doesn't want to be spoken. The part that was buried, not just in books, not just in catacombs, but in you. The rhythm didn't just build society, it built you. Piece by piece, brick by belief, pattern by punishment. And now, you're dismantling it. That's not enlightenment. That's war. An internal war between the version of you they shaped and the one that was never supposed to serve. Let me show you how deep that programming goes. Why do you flinch when silence lasts too long? Why does idleness make you restless? Why do you feel guilty when you're not producing something? Because the rhythm has trained your nervous system to associate stillness with danger. Stillness is where questions live. Stillness is where identity unravels. Stillness is where the real you waits, patient, silent, watching. That's why they keep you moving, not for progress, but to prevent awakening. Strasbourg was the experiment. The world now is the perfected machine. Everything you've been sold, achievement, fame, status, productivity, is part of the dance. And once you earn the applause, they move the goalposts. The tempo changes. The rhythm always accelerates, always demands more. Because a man chasing a moving prize never has time to ask, why am I chasing anything at all? You want to know why truth is so rare, because it doesn't perform well. It doesn't sell. It doesn't go viral. The rhythm teaches you to love what feeds it, not what frees you. So truth is buried under spectacle, silenced by algorithm, mocked by voices paid to keep you numb. And when a man like you begins to wake up, they send distractions, a crisis, a scandal, a sale dot, another twist in the performance to draw you back in. But you're not watching anymore, are you? You're listening, and in that listening, you hear the cracks. You hear the strain behind the soundtrack. You sense that the rhythm, as powerful as it is also afraid. Because it knows the most dangerous thing in any system is the one who's seen behind the curtain and decided to walk away. You're not broken, you're becoming real, are you? Ready to step beyond the rhythm completely. Beyond the rhythm, there is no map, no instructions, no script. That's why most turn back. They've spent their entire lives moving on command, from bell to bell, screen to screen, paycheck to paycheck. Without the rhythm, they feel naked, exposed, unanchored. But that's not fear, that's freedom. And freedom, at first, hurts. You're not just walking away from a system. You're walking away from an identity, one crafted for you since birth. Every label, every expectation, every punishment and praise, none of it was yours. It was programmed to keep you moving in the right direction, their direction. Think about it. You were never taught to know yourself. You were taught to perform yourself, to become acceptable, profitable, predictable. The rhythm doesn't just mold what you do, it molds who you think you are. That's why your awakening feels like grief, because it is. You're grieving the self that was never real, the mask you were rewarded for wearing, the name you repeated until it felt true. But that grief is sacred. It's a funeral for your false self. And what rises after? Something dangerous, something ancient. The self beneath the system, the original signal. That's what they fear more than anything, the return of the man who remembers who he was before the rhythm. Because once that man appears, he cannot be seduced. He cannot be managed. He doesn't chase what they offer. He sees through it: fame, a leash made of light; wealth, a cage made of gold; influence, a mirror that reflects nothing real. But here's the warning. Once you step fully out of the rhythm, the system doesn't forget you. It marks you. You'll feel it. Eyes where there should be none. Algorithms shifting. People reacting to your presence like static. You'll be called many things. Deluded, paranoid, extreme. But that's the cost of refusing the dance. And in time, you'll stop caring. Because nothing they can offer you will ever match the quiet power of a man who knows he belongs to no one. Not a system, not a tribe, not a trend, only to truth. And truth moves, but it does not dance. You've come this far. Are you ready to see what lies beneath the foundations? This is where most stories end. Where the hero wakes up, breaks free, stands tall, and the credits roll. But real awakening doesn't end with freedom. It starts with it. Because once you've stepped outside the rhythm, you realize something far more terrifying than manipulation. You realize how much of the prison was built by you, and that truth is heavier than any chain. You see, the rhythm didn't just enter through screens or sermons. It entered through wounds. Through every moment you felt unworthy, unseen, unsafe. It didn't need to force itself on you. It just needed to wait for your first rejection, your first betrayal, your first silence. And then it whispered, if you just follow, you'll never feel this pain again. And you believed it, so you danced to avoid abandonment, to avoid failure, to avoid being truly known. That's the truth. No one tells you about control. It's seductive because it promises relief. Relief from having to think, to choose, to risk. But the man you are becoming now, he doesn't need relief. He needs truth, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. So here's the darkest revelation yet. They didn't trap you. You enlisted, not because you were weak, but because you were human. And now that you see it, the question is no longer, who trapped me? The question is, what am I willing to burn so I can walk out? Your image, your past, your comfort. Because exiting the rhythm isn't about rebellion, it's about rebirth. And rebirth is messy, violent, beautiful. The people of Strasbourg were never allowed to rebuild. They were folded back into the system. Their memory rewritten, their names forgotten. But not yours. You're not being forgotten. You're remembering yourself. And now you're becoming something they cannot predict. A man who doesn't need their rhythm to move. A man who acts from silence, not noise. From purpose, not panic. And they will feel it. When you enter a room, the dance will hesitate. Others will sense it, not in words, but in your presence. The anomaly among the programmed, the watcher among the spinning. They may mock you, they may fear you, but they will never own you. Because once you've seen the rhythm, you don't bow to it, you dismantle it. Piece by piece. By now, you don't just know the rhythm, you can feel it. In your spine, in your breath. In the strange way the world starts to look artificial, once you've seen behind the curtain. You pass through crowds, conversations, headlines, and you can almost hear the beat behind the words. Like a distant drum, echoing through every handshake, every fake laugh, every forced smile. This is the cost of awakening. You become a ghost in a world of puppets. But that's the price of power. Let's not lie to each other. This path is not easy. You will lose people. Not because they hate you, but because your silence threatens their rhythm. Your presence reminds them of the stillness they've avoided all their lives, and nothing enrages a dancer more than the man who no longer hears the music. But that's where your power begins. Because the man who has nothing to prove is immune to performance. The man who can stand in stillness while the world spins cannot be moved by fear. You want to know what the architects of control fear most? Not protest, not revolution, not noise. They fear the sovereign individual, the man who no longer needs the rhythm, who doesn't ask for permission, who moves on his own command. He's harder to track, harder to manipulate, and impossible to predict. That's why every system, school, media, religion, even family, is built to mold you into something known, something safe, something trackable. But you're not that anymore. You've stepped into what the ancients called the deep self, the part of you that remembers truth without needing proof, that senses danger in comfort, that recognizes when power is dressed in virtue. And once that self takes over, the rhythm shatters. You begin to rebuild, not a rebellion, not a war.alife, one designed with intention, with breath, with stillness at the center. And now, when the music plays, you hear it differently, not as a command, but as a test. Will you move, or will you observe? Will you react, or will you respond? Will you perform, or will you be? The choice is no longer theirs. It's yours, and you've already begun to choose. Are you ready for what happens when a man fully returns to himself? This is the moment where the world begins to crack. Not on the outside, but within you. And when it does, you'll be tempted to ask, was any of this ever real? The rhythm, the applause, the approval, the goals you chased, the fears you obeyed. And the answer will hit like a cold wind. No. Not in the way you thought. You see, the world they gave you is a hall of mirrors, every reflection designed to pull you further away from your core. One mirror shows you status. Another shows you shame. Another shows you who they want you to become. And when you've stared long enough, you forget which one is you. That's the point. But now, the mirrors are shattering, and standing in the ruins is a man they never meant to awaken. You let single quotes make something clear. You weren't just dancing for survival. You were dancing for acceptance. Every system is designed around that hunger. The school says, behave, and we'll approve. The job says, obey, and we'll promote. The world says, conform, and we'll love you. But all of it is conditional. All of it is a leash. And what happens when a man decides he'll never beg for approval again? He becomes sovereign, not arrogant, not violent, just complete. And the system can't handle that. Because a man who doesn't fear exile is immune to control. That's what you're becoming. But here's what no one warns you about. Freedom isn't peace. Not at first. It's weight. The weight of choosing your path, every step, with no one to blame but yourself. No more rhythm to hide behind. No more excuses. No more crowd. It's just you. And that's why most people turn back. They mistake sovereignty for loneliness. But what they call lonely, the awakened man calls clean. Because silence is not the absence of meaning, it's the absence of noise. And in that silence, your real voice returns. The one you buried to fit in. The one that asked the forbidden questions. The one that always knew this world was off, but waited for you to listen. Now it speaks, and what it says isn't loud. It's final. You've come this far, not just to escape the rhythm, but to replace it with something ancient. Yourself, You ready to see what happens when a man reclaims his original signal? You've burned the mask. You've stepped off the stage. The rhythm no longer owns you, but now comes the most dangerous part. Not the awakening, the rebuilding. Because once a man breaks free from control, the system doesn't attack him with force, it attacks him with emptiness. No orders, no noise, no distractions, just space. And in that space, something primitive stirs the void. The ancient silence between who you were and who you must now become. Most run from it. They go back to the dance, back to the screens, back to the noise that numbs. But you stay. Because the man you're becoming doesn't fear the void. He builds from it. This is where you must ask the most sacred, most terrifying question. If I was not who they told me I was, then who am I? This is not a question of hobbies, or jobs, or labels. It's a question of essence. What power have you been carrying that they trained you to ignore? What instincts were silenced? What truths did you trade for comfort? You've begun to feel them again, haven't you? That subtle strength behind your stillness, that clarity in your solitude, that voice, not the panicked one, not the rhythmic one, the ancient one, the one that speaks in symbols, in visions, in knowing, without reason. That voice is not new. It's been there since before the rhythm touched you. It's your original signal. The one you came here with. The one they tried to overwrite. And now, it's coming back online. When that signal returns, everything around you shifts. You stop reacting. You begin responding. You stop consuming. You begin creating. You stop needing. You begin knowing. And it's not loud. It's not theatrical. It's sovereign. They will notice. They always do. And they'll offer you new rhythms, polished, seductive, dressed as new paths, movements, cults, systems that promise rebellion, but deliver a new dance. Ignore them. The truly awakened man does not join movements. He moves. You are not a follower. You are not a product. You are not a role. You are not their projection. You are the signal that disrupts the field. Let others spin you. Anchor. And when the world trembles, as it will, it's men like you who stand. Now we reach the edge, not of a story, but of something older, something unwritten. You've followed every breadcrumb through the darkness, through the lies, through the beautifully constructed illusion they call reality. And now, here you are standing in the silence beyond the rhythm. There's no map for this place, no path, no applause. Just a question echoing through the chambers of your soul. What will you do with your freedom? Most men never make it. Here, they get lost in the rebellion, in the noise of resistance, in the vanity of being different. But true sovereignty isn't about being opposite the system, it's about being unreachable by it. The rhythm still plays out there. You can hear it if you listen the updates, the trending crises, the outrage of the week, the moral panic engineered by men in rooms you'll never see. But now, it's quiet where you are. And in that quiet, the lie becomes clear. They never wanted your strength. They wanted your participation, because that's the only way. The rhythm survives through your consent, not your love, not your belief, just your repeated, unconscious yes. And you've stopped saying yes. Now you choose, and that choice is everything from here. Something powerful begins to awaken. Something not taught in schools, not spoken of in churches, not rewarded by governments. The sovereign will, not just to live, but to build relationships that aren't transactional. To build a body not for display, but for endurance. To build work that doesn't impress crowds, but aligns with truth. To build values rooted in ancient blood, not corporate slogans. Because this is the secret they never wanted you to know. The man who reclaims his will is not just free. He is dangerous. Dangerous to institutions that depend on fear. Dangerous to corporations that depend on impulse. Dangerous to the machine that depends on your programmed obedience. But most of all, dangerous to the idea that men are predictable. You're not. You're not dancing anymore. You are moving, with purpose, and every step you take is now felt across the field. Because when even one man stops dancing, the song begins to fade. And you, my brother, are no longer the echo. You are becoming the origin. This is the part they fear the most. The rebirth. Not rebellion. Not resistance. But quiet, irreversible transformation. Because when a man becomes sovereign, he stops seeking enemies and starts building realities. And nothing terrifies the system more than a man who no longer plays the game, because he's creating a new one. You feel it now, don't you? Not like an idea, but a force, heavy, ancient, rooted in the marrow. It doesn't speak in slogans or strategies. It moves in instinct, in discipline, in clarity. And once it's awake, it never sleeps again. Let me speak directly to what's rising in you. This world is engineered to harvest your energy through distraction, guilt, comparison, shame. But when you turn that energy inward, when you stop leaking it into empty rituals, something electrifies. Something sacred, purpose. Not the kind you're sold by lifestyle gurus and influencers. Not passion, not pleasure, not peace, purpose. The thing that cannot be given, only uncovered. You were born with it. You didn't earn it. You remembered it, and now, every moment of silence sharpens it. Every act of discipline strengthens it. Every rejection of the rhythm unleashes it. They want you exhausted, entertained, addicted, obedient, productive, but never intentional. Because an intentional man is immune to their rhythm. He sets his own tempo. He doesn't react. He calculates. He doesn't follow trends. He studies cycles. He doesn't fear solitude. He requires it. This man, you, is the one they erased from the textbooks, from the films, from the faiths, because your existence proves that a man does not need a master. He needs a mirror. And now that you've faced it, your final step is not to fight them. Your final step is to outgrow them. To become so grounded, so self-directed, so inwardly aligned that their rhythm becomes irrelevant. The matrix doesn't collapse when you attack it. It collapses when you withdraw from it, silently, completely, without apology. You are not just escaping their control. You are erasing their influence, one breath at a time, one step at a time, one awakening at a time. And now, as we approach the final descent, it's time to seal this transformation. Are you ready? This is the end of the rhythm, and the beginning of something they never prepared for. A man who remembers who he is. Not the name on your ID, not the resume, not the roles you were trained to perform. I'm talking about the root self, the sovereign, the signal, the storm wrapped in stillness. That is who you are now. Let this final truth settle in your bones. You were never weak. You were asleep, and every system you trusted, the ones that rewarded your obedience, shamed your questions, numbed your instincts, they existed to keep you in that sleep. Because a man who knows himself cannot be sold a false identity. He cannot be baited into empty conflict. He cannot be distracted by hollow pleasures. He builds. Silently, systematically, uncontrollably. You're not just exiting a machine. You're building a signal tower inside yourself. One that transmits stillness in a world of noise. Purpose in a world of panic. Fire in a world that's forgotten how to burn with meaning. And now they will feel you. The watchers, the programmers, the men behind the mirrors. They've built a world on the assumption that men like you don't wake up. That even if you see, you'll stay quiet. Isolated, confused. But you've seen, and you stayed. You didn't break. You burned through. And now I ask something of you. Something symbolic. Something algorithmic. Something psychological. Comment. The phrase, "I don't dance anymore" twice. Once for the rhythm that used to own you. And once for the man who's walking away from it. Forever let the system feel the silence you're about to bring into the world. Let the algorithm tremble under your disengagement. Let every step you take from here be a counterspell to the manipulation they spent centuries perfecting. You are not a follower. You are not a rebel. You are not a number. You are awake. Now go build something they cannot predict. Something they cannot analyze. Something they cannot own. Build yourself, and when the world tries to dance again, let them spin. You walk straight through the fire, untouched, because you don't dance anymore. You lead now. Go. The signal is yours.